it is essential that clients develop a tax governance structure that doesn't only allow them to be in control now, but to also make sure that they are ready for the future, that they're controversy proof, that they have their facts in order, and that they know where they stand, and overall that they're in control. My name is Jeroen van Mourik. I'm father of 3 children. I'm a tax lawyer. I've been a tax lawyer for 20 years, international field of taxation. I've lived abroad with a main focus on Asia and US-based clients. I think my expertise lies mainly in trying to build a bridge between the technical elements of my profession, but make them adaptive to my clients' everyday concerns and their business operation. So coming from something that's quite technical and sometimes boring for people, but building that bridge towards what it means for their business and how it can facilitate their business or how it can impact their business in a negative way if not dealt with properly. I think there's 2 big developments that are heavily impacting already my work today and even more so going forward. The first big development is similar to what other industries are also seeing, so digitalisation of the economy. Not only the big tech companies, but also the old school economy that is going through digitalisation. In my field of expertise that poses specific challenges and why you see that in other parts of society that process is already taking place or sometimes even close to getting into the next phase. My area of expertise is taxation. This is just starting. So new rules are being developed and implemented that are heavily impacting my clients and that we need to deal with to make sure that they enable their business. The second development is somewhat typical for my area of expertise. When I started 20 years ago, the field of taxation was something that nerdy guys like myself and nerdy girls were doing and nobody paid too much attention to. Our stakeholders were mainly our clients and then the tax director, maybe CFO. And in the past 20 years that has rapidly developed into a much broader field of stakeholders. It's an item on the political agenda. People have an opinion about taxation, about what taxation should look like. Legislation and case law used to be our guideline, and now we have much broader guidelines. Public opinion, discussion on fair share is becoming an increasing role in the field of taxation and is an extra element that we need to deal with and that companies need to deal with. Taxation used to be something between tax authorities, taxpayers and their advisors. Over the past years, that group of stakeholders has rapidly increased. NGOs, politicians have becoming part of that discussion, and also tax is becoming a topic in the public domain. Journalists have taken an interest, and that all has impact on the tax position of taxpayers, but more importantly also how they deal with taxation. I think one of the risks that is involved with this development is that while in the past companies were mainly worried about being compliant with the law, having a good relationship with the tax authorities and making sure that they paid what they felt they needed to pay. Because that discussion has broadened, they also need to take other people's opinions into account. And while the public opinion can be based on all facts and circumstances, we see that more and more the idea or the perceived notion of, for instance, tax avoidance is becoming an increasing role. Structures or transactions that take place in ordinary business can, if framed differently, give the impression that companies are, for instance, trying to avoid taxes or trying not to be tax transparent. That's one of the risks that I see for companies, even if they're not involved in any aggressive tax schemes, reputational risk as a result of everyday operations. An example of this is companies that make use of loans or leverage, as we say. It is very common in businesses that companies borrow money to make investments or to do other parts of their business. These days there's a big interest in companies that are, in the opinion of some, artificially reducing their tax base by introducing leverage into their structure, so interest deductions. This is something that can take place in ordinary course of business, but if framed differently, can cause reputational damage to a company that is acting in accordance with the law, but is also paying its fair share of taxes. My message to clients is to not only look at what's within the law, but also try to consider not only how their actions are perceived at this point in time, but also in 5 to 10 years from now. What is common practice today may be viewed very differently in 5 to 10 years from now. And although that's very difficult to predict, it is something that we already see trends that you can anticipate on. The use of holding companies, the use of tax haven jurisdictions like Cayman or Bermuda or even Guernsey, Jersey, are today still very common in a lot of bona fide cases. But we already see a trend that anything that has to do with these jurisdictions is frowned upon, despite the fact that there can be true business reasons for operating through those jurisdictions. One of the biggest challenges with regard to the digitalization of the economy in the field of taxation has to do with the completely disruptive nature of business models today. Within the tax field, we've developed certain principles over the years on basis of which we determine what profit is allocable to which jurisdiction and what tax should be paid on that. Those assumptions or those foundations have completely changed. An example is that we used to look very heavily at physical presence in a jurisdiction to determine whether taxes would be due and whether profits were allocable to those activities. In today's environment, for instance, with regard to platform business models, that is completely different. You can make profit without being physically present in a country. How do you deal with that? And then also, how do you deal with that in an international environment? Where one country increases its right to taxation, another country loses its right to taxation, and if they don't, you end up with double taxation. So all these developments do not only pose challenges from a technical perspective, but also how do you deal with that in an international environment, securing that people pay their fair share of taxes, but also do not end up paying double taxation. One consequence of the digitalization is that there's a lot more transparency relating to taxes. Government authorities have received more and more information about taxpayers' position and also how they do business. That also means that a lot of their efforts with regard to audits are data-driven. So based on data analysis, they determine who to audit, where potential mismatches take place. Companies have an opportunity to make sure that the data that is provided to the tax authorities properly reflects the way that they operate in the field of taxation. If there's an incorrect show of data regarding their tax position, they increase their risks of being audited. I think the key message that I would like to give to our clients is that they need to make sure that they are in control of their tax position. We still see too often that taxation is only dealt with by the time that the tax return needs to be filed, and then it's too late to make any amendments, and often we see that things cannot be repaired. It is essential that clients develop a tax governance structure that doesn't only allow them to be in control now, but to also make sure that they are ready for the future. That they're controversy-proof, that they have their facts in order, and that they know where they stand, and overall that they're in control. In addition to responding to technical questions, my role is much more that of a trusted business advisor. It's my job to guide my clients through legislative changes, not only to make sure that they are compliant with those changes, but also to make sure that they have a robust position going forward, taking into account various stakeholders.